Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. It must be challenging at times to run a biotech company. It's a very long, expensive process, developing new products, testing them, and then seeking approval to use them. And almost every country has different requirements and different hoops to jump through. Starpharma is an interesting example listed here in Australia. It's a biopharmaceutical company, and while its antiviral nasal spray is registered for sale in more than 30 countries around the world, it's still waiting on approval by the TGA here in Australia. Dr. Jackie Fairley is the CEO of Starpharma. Jackie, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thank you very much.
So you've been around for a while. I think you were founded in 1996 and listed on the ASX in 2000. There's been a big focus on antiviral products more recently because of COVID. Now, your Viralese nasal spray, that was in development prior to the pandemic?
No, in fact, it was developed in response to the pandemic. The ingredient in it, the antiviral ingredient in it, which is an example of a highly branched kind of polymer called a dendrimer, which is our specialty, that had already been developed, and we knew that it was potent against a bunch of other viruses, but we developed Viralese, the nasal spray formulation, in response to the COVID pandemic.
Okay, so in layman's terms, how does it work?
So it's got a specific ingredient in it, which is called SPL7013, which is a highly branched polymer molecule or a dendrimer. And essentially, it binds to the spike proteins on both the coronavirus that causes COVID, but also the influenza virus and all sorts of other viruses. It binds to those proteins and it renders the virus incapable of binding to and attaching to human cells. So it essentially creates a physical barrier between the virus and the mucosa of your nose, for instance, for COVID, or other mucosal surfaces for other viral infections. So the molecule had already been developed. We knew it was active against HIV and other sexually transmitted viruses, but we reformulated it into a nasal spray for use in respiratory infections, and we've shown it to be highly effective in inactivating all of the variants of the SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus.
Okay, so we have a product here developed in Australia, am I right in saying that?
Correct, yep, absolutely.
Which is effective. It's registered in more than 30 countries, including the United Kingdom, but it's not approved here yet. Why is that?
The reality is that the approval in any given country is very much at the control of the regulatory authority in that country. So in Australia, the TGA. As soon as we completed the development of the product, we pursued, obviously, its registration in the markets where we felt that the product was most needed. So we did actually go to the European market first, and we gained registration in Europe in March 2021, and we then subsequently submitted to the TGA, and the process with the TGA has simply been longer than it has been in other markets. But that regulatory process, they vary by country, and that's really something probably for the TGA to comment on, not us.
I'm showing my ignorance here, but why don't countries rely on each other?
Well, in fact, what you're referring to is a mutual recognition process, which does occur. Yeah,
much better put that way.
Yeah, it does occur in certain categories of healthcare products, and there is a degree of reliance upon the review by others. But there's also a local component to it, and every regulator is different. And so in Europe, for instance, it's not reviewed in every single country, obviously. It's reviewed centrally, and that makes it very efficient, obviously, in terms of accessing a large number of countries. But countries like Australia and Canada and others would do a degree of their own review. But we have a lot of shareholders in Australia. We have loads and loads of people approaching us every single day, really wishing, desperately wanting to get access to the product. And they include people who are, immunocompromised because they've had kidney transplants and things like that. And we certainly will make it available in Australia as soon as we're able to do so. For the time being, people would need to rely upon personal connections they might have in other countries.
Okay. So just before we leave virales, I understand the idea that it creates that barrier. Is it totally effective?
No preventative is ever, totally effective, including vaccinations and,
Yep.
other methods of protection, masks, as we've all learnt, air handling and things. So nothing is ever, 100% effective. What we do know is the antiviral ingredient in virales is highly effective at very rapidly inactivating all of the variants of SARS-CoV-2 that we've tested, including Omicron, where we've shown very high levels of efficacy. So, for instance, in a challenge study that we ran in a special WHO identified strain of mice where you challenge them with large numbers of virus, we showed more than 99.9% protection against infection where they were challenged with SARS-CoV-2. That was in one assay, and a very similar, I think it was 99.99 in Omicron, so even more efficacious against Omicron.
Yep.
And that's interesting because what we found is that for the viral variants like Omicron, which bind more tightly, and that's how they become more infectious than Delta and the other ones, actually the tighter they bind, the better our antiviral ingredient works, because that's actually how it acts.
Stay with me, Jackie. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Dr. Jackie Fairley, the CEO of Starpharma. Okay, so away from virales, you've signed major deals with some of the big pharmaceutical companies, AstraZeneca, Merck. What are you doing with them? What are you working on with them?
Yeah, so we've recently signed the second one with Merck and also with Genentech, and we have had a long-standing collaboration with AstraZeneca. What we're doing in those collaborations, and the AstraZeneca one is a multi-product license, so they've secured commercial rights to our technology. And this dendrimer technology, which is as I mentioned earlier, these large, roughly spherical, highly branched polymer molecules. The dendrimer means tree-like.
Right.
Those highly branched molecules can be used in virales, which is for the antiviral effectiveness of a single version of that. But other variants of the dendrimer molecule can be used to actually carry drugs. So you attach the drug to the polymer molecule, and then this larger, what we call a nanoparticle, which is the dendrimer plus the loaded drug onto it, that modifies its distribution in the body, and it has the ability to improve efficacy and to reduce toxicities. And that's a function of changing the distribution of the molecules in the body. And I'm talking at the moment about the use in oncology. So
right.
Genentech, Merck, AstraZeneca are, sort of largely in the oncology space. We can use it in other areas too, but in those oncology settings, you're often dealing with molecules which are very effective as anti-cancer drugs, but they have what we call off-target toxicities. So toxicities on, your gut or your hair follicles or your bone marrow, all of which results in either illness or untoward side effects. And so the dendrimer technology enables us to target tumour tissue more, so we get much more drug into the tumour tissue than you do with drug alone when it's on a dendrimer, on our DEP dendrimers. And so in those deals, all of those companies, and that's 3 of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world, they are all seeking to access our delivery technology to improve the performance of their drugs. And they could be drugs which are already marketed, or they could be drugs which are in the development stage still, but they might be drugs which, for instance, are a little bit too toxic, and so they wouldn't be well enough tolerated. And so we're trying to optimize or improve the way they perform, and we do so via allowing them to access and creating these dendrimer versions of those drugs.
Isn't that one of the holy grails of medicine, though? The fact that you can actually get a drug to the spot that it's needed without having huge ramifications for the rest of the body?
Absolutely, and particularly in cancer, because cancer drugs traditionally are pretty nasty because they have nasty side effects. And so it is, this is a technology that enables you to target tumour tissue and to significantly improve the window between the amount of drug where you start to get efficacy and the amount of drug where you start to get toxicity, which is called the therapeutic index. And so in the case of, for instance, one of the AstraZeneca drugs, which is currently in human clinical trials, we were able to widen that window by 25-fold.
Wow. That's impressive. I mean, that's a real advancement in a sense, which, sort of beyond finding a drug that works, it's actually it's kind of like the infrastructure. I'm trying to get my head around how this works, but it's kind of like the rail line or the infrastructure that the drug works via to actually, help the patient, but minimize the harm.
Absolutely. Well, that's the whole objective of a drug delivery technology like our DEP technology, is to optimize the efficacy whilst you're using the technology to, reduce and modify the toxicities. And the reality is that, the dendrimer delivery technology can allow you to not only improve existing drugs, so you might be able to, as we've done, we've got some products of our own where we've been able to take out some nasty toxic excipients or detergents in formulations by using the dendrimer, and also target the cancer tissue. But also in the case of some of the other drugs that we're working on with some of our partners, those products would not actually be able to complete their development without the benefit of a delivery technology, because they need some of those characteristics to enable them to perform well enough and to have a therapeutic window which is wide enough.
Jackie, I've been given a lesson this morning, which I appreciate. Thank you very much for talking to us here on Fear and Greed.
Very welcome. Thank you very much. Bye.
That was Dr. Jackie Fairley, the CEO of Starpharma. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.